everybody, and welcome back to another video from Northeast Christian Apologetics. My name's Simon Williams, and today we are going to be continuing our reading of The Character of Jesus by Charles Jefferson. We are up to chapter 13, The Optimism of Jesus. John 16:33, be of good cheer. By optimism is not meant the jaunty, brainless, happy-go-lucky buoyancy which so often calls itself by this pretentious name. If you insist upon defining an optimist as a man who plays only with sunbeams and who can hear nothing but harmonies and who is slightly concerned with the world's agonies and tragedies because of his fancy that no matter what he or anyone else does, everything is certain to come out all right, then Jesus was not an optimist. There is a sentimental optimism which is irrational and immoral. It is the product of a shallow brain and a stupid heart. It shuts its eyes to all hideous facts and stops its ears to all horrible sounds, and insists that in spite of appearances all is well with the world. This sort of optimism faces the future with a confidence born not out of courage, but of moral indolence. It assumes that there is in the nature of things an irresistible tendency upward, and that irrespective of the conduct of any man or any set of men, all will be well in the end. No such optimism as this is known in the New Testament. If we have our superficial optimists, we have also our shallow and short-sighted pessimists. There are men who have a genius for seeing shadows. Their ears are keen for discords. They keep their eyes wide open and see in a lurid light the tragedies of the world's life, its masses of suffering and wretchedness and woe, its sorrows and vices and sins, lie like a great weight upon the mind and the heart until the former is dizzy and the latter is sick. These men listen to the world's sighings and sobbing and agonizing until history seems a hideous nightmare and existence itself is a curse. If such a man were to speak to you tonight, he would tell you a story which would lacerate and darken your heart. He would remind you of what the thieves and the robbers, big and little, have been doing. He would call your attention to the stories of greed and lust, cruelty and lawlessness, which have recently come in from all parts of the world. He would pile up before you the sickening record of a single mouth's outrage and atrocity and crime, and then ask you if it is not clear that everything is going to the dogs. These pessimists lift up their voices on every side. They tell us that Republican institutions are in a process of decay, that our cities are hopelessly corrupted and sunken, that the days of the Republic itself are numbered. As for society, there is no health in it. From its head to its feet, there is nothing but festering sores. Babylon never matched our luxury, and Rome never touched the depths of our infamy. The church, like everything else, is decaying and is fit only for the bonfire. We may whistle if we wish to keep up our courage, but after us, the deluge. The world is running down a very steep place toward the edge of the abyss. Not a few men are thus thinking and speaking. Two of the greatest writers of the 19th century, Thomas Carlyle and John Ruskin, were pessimistic in their temper and outlook. The Scotchman filled the world with his shriekings, and the Englishman filled the world with his sighings. Innumerable smaller men are filling the world with their sniffings and whimperings. But from the grinning optimists and the hysterical pessimists, we can expect little. They have nothing to offer toward the solution of the great world problems. Let us open our New Testament and listen to a man who, in these confused and distracting times, can give us confidence and hope. Jesus of Nazareth was not a man who could shut his eyes to the sorrow and the heartbreak of the world. Never were eyes wider open than his. He saw everything. He saw things which the world had passed by unnoticed. He saw suffering in its every form. It tugged at his heartstrings. The tired, sad faces of human beings haunted him. They spoke to him of the tragedy of the world's disordered heart. He had ears which caught every shriek of agony, every cry of distress, every sigh of want. He saw with eyes which pierced. Underneath the tragedy of suffering, he saw the blacker tragedy of sin. Down underneath the surface of the world's life, he saw the cancer which was eating up its strength and its hope and its joy. He recognized as none other the tremendous power of evil. He saw with open eyes the roads which led to death. He knew, as no other has ever known so well, that evil must be resisted, that sin must be faced and grappled with, that it is only by struggle, suffering, and death that the victory can be won. But he remained, nevertheless, undaunted. He never loses heart. He sees all and he hears all, but he never gives up hope. He faces facts as they are, and he predicts grander facts which are to be. He sees both sides, the bright side and the dark side. And having seen both sides, his face has light on it. He sings and he also sobs. His singing is sometimes broken by his sobbing, but he is never overwhelmed. He never surrenders. His head is always up, and his unfailing exhortation is, "Be of good cheer." This is the dominating note of the New Testament. It comes up out of the heart of the blackest tragedy which our world has known. What a sad and depressing book the New Testament ought to be, considering the dismal story it has to tell. It gives us a life of one who was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. It portrays his sufferings through the cruel, disappointing years of his horrible death upon the cross. It narrates his awful predictions of coming woe and loss and ruin. It tells us that the leading cities of Galilee are rushing to destruction, and that even Jerusalem, glorious with the triumphs of 1,000 years, is irretrievably doomed, and that not one stone of all its stately edifices shall be left standing on another. Its destruction shall be complete. And yet, notwithstanding this heartbreaking story, the New Testament does not depress us or leave a shadow on the heart. It is a jubilant, exhilarating book, and the words which linger longest in the ear are, "Be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." The New Testament is a gospel, a bit of glorious news, because at the center of it there lives and works the world's greatest optimist. Here is the optimist whom we have been looking for. This is the man who can inspire our confidence and give us hope. We need a man with open eye, an open ear, an open heart, a man who sees things as they are and knows the thickness of the belt of night. We cannot follow a leader who keeps crying peace when we know there is no peace, nor can we trust a teacher who asserts that all is well when his assertion is contradicted daily by the experience of the world. Give us a man who feels the fury of the storm and is also certain of the calm which is going to follow. Give us a man who can measure accurately the dimensions of the night and who also sees the dawning of a glorious morning. Jesus is a prince of optimists. His optimism is the optimism of God himself. Let's try to find the secret of Jesus' optimism. The secret is written large across the pages of the gospel. It was a secret too good to keep. He gave it to everybody who had ears to hear. It was an abiding confidence in God. We are sure of him sometimes. Our faith is clouded and it is intermittent. It floods and ebbs like the tide. Jesus never doubted. His vision was unclouded. His trust was absolute. To him, God was an ever-present Father. This was his new name for God. The prophets and poets of Israel had only seldom ventured to think of God as Father, and then only by way of dim surmise. With Jesus, God was always Father. This is the name he carried on his lips when a boy of 12. It was on his lips when he passed from this world into the other. He placed it on the lips of every man who followed him. It constantly amazed him that men had so little faith in God. Have faith in God. This was the exhortation with which he braced the hearts of those who wished to live his life and do his work. The words came with the power of a revelation, because warm with the blood of a heart which knew the secret of perfect trust. Along with unswerving trust in God, there went an unshakable confidence in man. Jesus believed in human nature. He saw the possibilities and capacities of the human heart. He saw men's littlenesses, frailties, vices, sins, but underneath all these, he saw a soul created in God's image. The deepest thing in man he saw to be not animalism, but godlikeness. He called Simon, the son of Jonas, a rock, when Simon was counted the most fickle and fluctuating man in all the town. Jesus saw that which was deepest in him. He had confidence not only in people who went to church, but also in people who never went. He had hope of the publicans and sinners. He knew that Zacchaeus could repent and that Matthew could become a preacher. He believed that men and women who have fallen all the way to the bottom can climb back again. The harlots are going into the kingdom before you. Thus, he spoke to a company of hard-hearted pessimists who had lost confidence in the recoverableness of human nature. Man, in spite of his aberrations and stumblings and fallings, is a being on whom you can rely. He has in him the very essence and nature of God. And so Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Thou art rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it." What sublime confidence! Can an unconquerable institution, one against which no forces in the universe can possibly prevail, be constructed out of men? Can impregnable walls be built of human nature? Can eternal foundations be laid in human hearts? Yes, says Jesus, and without a doubt of the fidelity of his apostles, he rolled the huge world upon their shoulders and went away. Nor could any experience break down this trust in the divine capacities of human nature. When has a man had greater reason to abandon faith in men than this optimist of Galilee? He lived in a corrupt and demoralizing age. Government was both tyrannical and rotten. Its officials were for the most part cynics and grafters. The Jewish church was formal, lifeless, and hypocritical. Its leaders, many of them, were dead to the movements of God's Spirit. Society was disgustingly corrupt. Men had grown skeptical everywhere of the honesty of men. Society was disgustingly corrupt. Men had grown skeptical everywhere of the honesty of man or the virtue of woman. But Jesus trusted men. He did this in the teeth of experiences which swept over him like a dark and devastating flood. His entire career was a tragedy. He was suspected, misrepresented, hated. He was surrounded by liars wherever he went. No matter what he said, his sentences were twisted, and no matter what he did, his motives were impunged. Such treatment is apt to sour the heart of anyone who is long subjected to it. Jesus was mistreated all the way. The inhuman wretches who tortured him in the courtyard of Pontius Pilate were doing only what men had done to him from the beginning. His life was one long-drawn crucifixion. Men were always jamming thorns into his brow, jabbing spears into his side, driving spikes through his hands and feet, but he never gave up faith in human nature. When he saw that men were determined to take his life, he said, "If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me." He felt that no matter what cruel and devilish things human nature might be guilty of, there was, after all, down deep in the heart, that which would respond to forgiveness and love. The enemies of Jesus were the meanest, most unprincipled, diabolical set of human hounds which ever tracked an innocent man to death, but they never broke down his confidence in the divinity of the human heart. It was not only his enemies, but his friends who caused him unspeakable anguish. Among his own disciples, in the innermost circles of his trusted friends, there was a man who, in return for all his confidence and all his goodness, became a traitor, and betrayed him into the hands of the men who had agreed upon his death. And this traitor did not betray him in a manner decent even among traitors, but in a way of which a devil might have been ashamed. He betrayed Jesus with a kiss. Hell itself can produce nothing viler than sugar-coated treachery. But no matter what individual men may do, man is to be trusted still. When he comes to his true self, he will say, "I will arise and go to my Father." The faith of Jesus is in marked contrast to the skepticism of many individuals whom we have known. There is nothing so staggering to one's confidence in human nature as an unfortunate experience in early life. A young man starts out hopeful and trustful, falls in with men of good reputation and high standing who gouge him and skin him. And for the rest of his life, the man is skeptical and possibly cynical. A young woman begins life with a heart which trusts everybody. She is deceived and betrayed either by man or by woman, and she carries a wound which time does not heal. There are in every community men and women soured on the world, suspicious of everybody, clinging to the conviction that there is nobody in whom one can trust. Would that all such cynics might come to Jesus and learn from him to expect large things from human nature everywhere. He sees the shallowness, the paltriness, the frailty of the heart, but he also sees its capacities, its possibilities, the mustard seed germs of virtues and graces which the Spirit of God can unfold. We measure men too much by their powers and not enough by their capacities, by what they are today and not what they may become later on. It was because the eyes of Jesus swept the future that he could stand around the wreckage of a race in ruins and say, "Be of good cheer." This indomitable optimist has confidence in you. You have no hope for yourself. He has. You see your weakness, sordidness, vileness. He sees deeper. And seeing deeper, he has hope for you. He sees your capacity of God. He knows what you can do when you have come to yourself. He sees deeper also into God. You have no adequate conception of the patience or the mercy of the infinite Father. He has. You do not know what infinite love can accomplish. He does. Because of your transgressions, you have lost faith in yourself. He has not. Because you have failed 1,000 times, you say there is no use trying anymore. He says, try again. If you give yourself to him, he will make you an optimist. And with that, we've reached the end of the chapter, and you know what that means? That means that we get to celebrate. Woohoo! Woohoo! And if you made it to the end of the chapter, I commend you, and I hope that you enjoyed the optimism of Jesus. I hope that you can see that that Jesus sees you with the eyes of a being who knows you deeply, who knows what you are made of, that you are made not only of stardust, which is mundane and pointless and useless, but you are made of stronger stuff. You're made in the image of God himself, okay? Go forth and be of good cheer, because you have within you the capacity of having a relationship with God the Father, okay? You have enormous amounts of potential within you. And all you need to do in order to realize that potential is to trust God, to seek first the kingdom of heaven, to pray and spend time with God, okay? When you do that, you become better equipped to do your day, okay? And you'll be surprised at what God will do for you. You'll be surprised at what God can get you through. So persevere, be strong, be optimistic in the way that Jesus is optimistic. Don't lie about the struggles. Acknowledge them. Bring them before God, and trust that God has the power to see you through it, okay? I'll see you next time for chapter 14, the chivalry of Jesus, and God bless. Have a great day.